I interviewed Dan Harris a couple of weeks ago, the ABC News guy who wrote 10% Happier, you know, and he mentioned during the interview that he had just meditated before the interview and that it had been really unpleasant. And, you know, he just had to sit there and suffer for half an hour. And my heart went out to him because in my experience, the way I went about it or learned, it was always enjoyable and, you know, something I looked forward to, not something that took serious discipline to sit down and do because it was so gratifying. And I said, maybe you could just go easier on yourself. Maybe you're straining, struggling. So as you, after all your decades of experience and practice and teaching, do you still regard meditation as necessarily often being an ordeal? Or has your teaching evolved to the point where, that's sort of a judgmental way of stating it. I don't mean to say that what I've been doing is more evolved, but has your understanding of meditation changed in such a way that when you teach people now, they don't have to go through as much difficulty as you went through in your earlier days?
That's a very interesting question. I would say that how difficult meditation is at a given time is going to be a function of basically two things. How big the challenge is that you're experiencing from the outside world, and how big, so that's factor number one, because I don't care how practiced you are, if you're facing a big challenge in the world, hey, you sit down to meditate, there may be some uncomfortable content there.
Sure.
Another factor is that there's a natural rhythm of release of what we call technically the samskaras. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this term. In the Pali language, sankhara. In Sanskrit, samskara. And those are in general, the habit forces deep within. It's one of the Indian words for what the West calls the unconscious. And there's a little bit of an implication often that these are limiting forces, although technically samskaras are any kinds of habit forces, positive or negative. But there are limiting forces within us, negative samskaras, and they're deep, deep down. And when they release, our surface sensory experience might be uncomfortable.
Yes.
So through a combination of the external challenges from situations, some combination of that plus this sort of natural rhythm of release of these samskaras, then sometimes practice is going to be easier, sometimes it's going to be harder. And I think we just have to accept that that's the way it goes. If you run in nature, you're going to sometimes encounter hills, sometimes encounter valleys, and you shouldn't stop running just because you have a hill. Now, to get to your question, though, which is a very interesting and meaty question, with regards to how my teaching has evolved over the years, I definitely have something I can say, which is, it's a paraphrase. One might say all problems have solutions, okay? That's a phrase that a person might use. Now I'm going to modify that phrase in a little bit of a strange way. I'm going to say all problems are solutions. They are solutions to some other problem, but you don't realize it. So I understand that that sounds very abstract and a little weird. So here's what but it goes to the heart of the way that I like to teach practice. When a person is encountering something that is perceived as problematic, my main job is to find a way to make that an optimal growth experience for that person. And I don't mean an optimal growth experience in the sense of, well, everything is just another effing growth opportunity, okay? I don't mean that. I mean that the structure of each specific challenge as it comes up, when you analyze it carefully, will have within it features that if you work with them will optimize your growth. So when a person is having a hard time, I will run them. This is where the interactive algorithm comes in. I start asking them questions, getting a lot of very specific information about the sensory makeup of the challenge that they're going through. And then, based on that information, I'll be able to show them often that what they thought was a problem has associated with it a very specific window of opportunity. If you work with it this particular way, you're going to get something that you couldn't get if you weren't having this so-called problem. So one of my main jobs is to show people the optimal way to work with each challenge as it comes up. So if Dan were my student and said, oh, I had this terrible, uncomfortable experience, I would start a detailed probing process to try to get a sense of exactly what that was sensorially. And there's a high probability that something would come up there that I'll be able to say, oh, okay, that aspect of it is actually going to give you a payoff that you couldn't get otherwise. It's a really good thing, but you have to work with it this way, and I'll show you how to do that.